Tumah Chiburim. Sheretz is only Tumas Maga. Oichlin are not Nasa Abatuma, but the Makabel Tumas Abatuma, and only with Hechsher, and only Zayin Mashkin and Makabel Tuma, with the general, each one with its dinim. And in Tumas Nida, there's Maga and Masa and Mishkav and Moishav and Dam Zivos as Avatuma V'Reika Meimi Ragleho, as the Ram says in the Pirush Mishnayis, in the beginning of Say the Tyrus, Tumazova Koleles Shivad Obois Vehimas Gazova Atzma Avatuma Boilo Avatuma, and the Ram also has it in Mishnah Torah in Hilchus Matam Mishkav Moshev in Perik Aleph and in Perik Gimel. And this also will be the same for Yoledes in Mitzvah Kuf. Okay. Mitzvah Kuf Aleph we did last week, and we'll do it again in Mitzvah Shem. First of all, the most important question here, and I think I probably mentioned it last week, is that contrary to the Rambam's approach in the Hagdoma to say the Taharos, as Pirush Mishnayis, that he says that Tzoras is one Avatuma, and it has subsumed under it Tumas Tzoras Odom, Tzoras Nige Begodim, Nige Batim. Here the Rambam makes Tzoras Odom, Nige Begodim, and Nige Batim, the three separate mitzvahs. And the question is, why and how? Is Loshin in the Pirush Mishnayis and Akdoma to say that Taz Tumas Tzoras Yesh Ba Arba Ovos Mitzvah Muchot V'Anikra Gam Mitzvah B'Mei Gomroi U'Mitzvah B'Mei Svira, which is different than a Tuma after the original Tahara, before the final Tahara, U'Bege Menuga U'Bayis Menuga. So it is true on one hand that the Ram has polemics with Sadigoin, or someone who's of the opinion someone of Sadigoin. He has polemics with someone who clearly says that Tzoras Odom is 11 mitzvahs. The Sadigoin happens to count it as 10. Okay, it's not very far. And the same way that the Rambam said that the fikeh of Tzoras Odom is all one mitzvah, so we can say that Tzoras is all one general category, and Nigei Tzoras Odom and Nigei Beged and Nigei Batim all should be one mitzvah. So if you look carefully at the Rambam over here in Kuf Aleph and Kuf Beis, we'll go through it and see exactly how this happens. He's going out of his way to explain that Tzoras Odom is different than Nigei Begodim, which is different than Nigei Batim. And that is, he just says, Beis Dinei Tzoras Odom Shemimeno Tomei Uma Shemeno Toho. So that is very peculiar about Tzoras Odom, because here we'll go through them one at a time, we'll see exactly what it is, but Nige Begodim, he'll talk about Kriya and Sreifa and Rechitza and Ta'ara. And in Nige Batim, he's going to talk about Netitzas Mitzvas Aseh and Netitzas Kula. And here, in Nige Odom, he talks about, we'll see, Mashim Mimeno Tome, U'Mashim Mimeno Tor, U'Mashim Mimeno Tzricha Hezga, or Eino Tzricha Hezga. We have to know what Eino Tzricha Hezga means. U'Mashi Tzarech Im Hezga Giluach, which is Lachas HaNesek. And the whole idea of Nesek, you certainly don't find in, certainly don't find in anything except for Nigei Odom. This is very similar, and it follows the paradigm that the Rambam sets up clearly in Aseh Kuf Yud Zayin. He says in Aseh Kuf Yud Zayin, when he talks about counting Erchin as 4 separate mitzvahs, Al Yachshav Choshev She'elu Al Bo Minim Ve'Erchin Yeh B'neim Shituf, since they have the same name called Erchin, Yechayiv Shimnu Mitzvah Achas, Aval Heim Al Bo Mitzvahs Yesh Chol Achas Mehen Din Zura As Dino Acheres. If they have peculiar dinim, then they're separate mitzvahs. We all Yichlum Shem Erech outside Shituf Hashem. It's just a name, but it doesn't really reflect what they are, because they're basically 4 separate mitzvahs. However, one could claim that if you accept this, we'll go through how the Rambam is going to show in each one of them that they're somewhat different than the other, different dinim, with the paradigm of Eilchin. One could question and claim that Tzoras Odom and Nesek are 2 separate mitzvahs. Voraya, that the Torah actually, when it says Zeis HaTorah L'chol Nega HaTzoras V'Lanesek in Vayiko Yudalid Nun Dalid, the Torah seems to be saying that they're separate. It could be that the Rambam was machrir that the mitzvah achas, because there are 2 other mitzvahs which both Soras, Odom, and Nesek are subsumed under. And one of them is a mitzvah called Heker Mitzvah, which the mitzvah is from the Posik in Vayikra Yud Gimel Mem Hey Mem Vav Vatzavua Asher Boy Hanega Begodi Yufrumim V'Rosh Yefrua V'Asofim Yater V'Tome Tome Yiko Kol Yimei Asher Hanega Bo Yitmo Tomeru Bodod Yeshe B'Chutz HaMachne Moshavoi. And also the Tahara, which the Ram talks about in Shiur Yud Aleph, which is Tahara Shel Tziporim Tiglachas, is only peculiarly in Tzoras Odom. We'll have to deal with this, Mitzvah Hashem, later, about whether there's how Tziporim and Batim and the Ram putting the same mitzvah. But at the moment, in the frame of reference of Shiur Yud Aleph, you can make a case that there are 2 mitzvahs which are peculiar to Tzoras Odom, which apply to both Nesek and all the cases of Tzoras Odom. So the Ram can count it as one. Now, he says like this, Ma shemimeno tome, uma shemimeno, umitzvazu koleles kol dine tzaras adam, which means all the fikir, all the different permutations of tzaras adam are not separate mitzvahs, but they're different possibilities of permutations of the mitzvah called tzaras adam. And you don't count these various permutations. And he does something amazing over here. He says, Mashimenu tome, mashimenu toho. Mashimenu toho. What does it mean, mashimenu toho? That if, for example, boihak and polach atzoras bekuloi, the din is that they're toho. So the Ram says that if you count fikir, if you count ofanim, you don't only count the ofanim that you have the mitzvah, but you count the ofanim that you don't have the mitzvah. The same way he does that. This is a very strange thing that he has the fikr. He does that by golus, that when he counts the 15 possible mitzvahs in Shiur Shvi of golus, he counts those that are shoygeg kol lemezid, and he basically says that there's no golus, and that's a fikr, and that's another expression of the mitzvah golus. You have the expression when golus happens and when golus doesn't happen, and you have a similar thing. The Rambam at the beginning of Shiur Shvi, that if you counted all the different fikr of Yevomo and Chalitza, Elu miyabim lo cholzim, cholzim lo miyabim, miyabim lo cholzim, or lo cholzim lo miyabim, and you have cases where there's no Yibam and no Chalitza, and they're also expressions of fikir of tzaras. So the Rambam in general, the Shita say, ma shemimenu tomei, ma shemimenu toho. Ma shemimenu tzricha hezger, ma she'enu tzricha. But ma shemimenu tomei is, they are peculiar, even though pisyain applies in general to all the different types of tzaras, but se'er lovon and michias bosachai is very peculiar to Adam. On the other hand, this confuses the issue with Nesek, because you don't have them in Nesek. Nesek, you have pisyain. And you have a different type of se'er. So it could be that Sar, I don't know, that Sar in general, and you should equate the two. That's a very odd thing. Okay, this has to be thought about, but this is what the Chayur is trying to say. Umashi mimenu tomei, umashi mimenu toho, umashi mimenu tzricha hezger, which is a neger of Lovon, because both Batim and Begodim is Yirak Rach and Adamdom. This is very peculiar Adam of Neger Lovon. And then again, Nesikin have the issue. But the idea of Nesikin here is also peculiar to others, so you have to understand. And you have to contrast it to Nesik. Whether it's Tzricha Hezger or ain't Tzricha Hezger. What does it mean, ain't Tzricha Hezger? So you're going to say ain't Tzricha Hezger, it's tall. You can't say that. Umashi mena tall. He said before, and that was Boak, and that was Polach Tzaras Bekula. So what's this case? So I would assume that, see, here you have the problem. Mashe eno tzricha hezger, you would say, Mashe eno tzricha hezger, I could imagine it's Seir, Lovon, Umicha, the Simone Hechlet. Okay? So Mashe meno tome, you have to ask yourself, what's a meno tome? What tome are we talking about? Are we talking about Hezger? Are we talking about Hechlet? And if we have this is Hezger, the first one, Mashemeno Tzricha Hezger, or Eno Tzricha is referring to Hechlet, so what's Mashemeno Tome? So something's going to happen over. You have to understand what each one of these things are, but it's a side problem. Uma sheyitztarch ima Hezger giluach, which is Tiglachas HaNesek. Here, in Tiglachas HaNesek, the question is, the Torah says in Tiglachas HaNesek, it says V'hiskalach. So maybe it should be a separate mitzvah in Mitzvahs. And the one who asked this question is the Mishnah Melech. The Mishnah Melech in Hilchos Tumas Ras in Perek Ches Halacha Gimel, V'ulai asei zeh di v'hisgalech v'hisgalach lechoshev asei shelo monu oisei moni ha-mitzvos b'chal asen v'eino elo hachona kidei leida hapisyan. It's hachona. A new thing. It's because it shows Yud. It's a Hagdoma. Okay, it's an amazing thing. I don't know. It's very odd. Well, we doma the Tiglachas mitzvah by Mitera or whatever. Tichsiv v'gilach shu asay gomo ko shemono isay moni ha-mitzvos v'shum hochi itzachocha l'rabbis mikra denozeh l'Tiglachas mitzorachiyim. See, suggests the possibility that it's achona. So first of all, he says, why? Because without it, you can't imagine Pisyan. This is very difficult because the Tiglachas Soviv HaNesech is only after a week of Hezger. It's the second Hezger. The Rambam Perek Hilchos Tumas Ras Perek Ches Halacha Beis. So it's mucha from this. The first Hezger didn't have a Tiglachas. It's Pisyan without Tiglachas. The whole discussion of Achona l'chayr is very difficult. In the frame of reference of the Mishnah Melech, it's saying in the Rambam or in the Raiv or anywhere. So l'chayra, the Ram's answer to this is very simple. Because the Ram's saying that Tiglach, what he's doing over here, mitzvah zu kolelis kol dinei tzaras adam, and part of it is Tiglachas HaNesek. So it means this all is subsumed under the mitzvah of tzaras adam. This, you see, however, it's not 100% clear. It could be because it's fikr, or could be other things. But see, it's not really fikr. Fikr, you would say it's a type of tzaras adam. And here, it's a prat. What the Ram is doing is it's subsuming not only fikr, but see, the question is, see, if you have 11, the Tiglachas, the Chayra, yeah. Here it is. Yeah. So here it has. Here it is. This is probably v'hifrid b'chlal aguf es alosh v'azokum v'osa oisam mitzvah shishis l'afsadigoyim v'koves hasimen ametame shu hafichas hasei l'tzohov lo l'lovon. Then he has over here the aseh, that's klachas gabachas. Then he has an aseh over here, the osa es in nishiras aseh shebe kolachas over gabachas v'zuloson kedin sha evri aguf v'shom v'ish ki more b'mi pasponov at seif shtei aparshias. And the interesting thing is, Rapsadia does not count v'izgalach. Okay, because this is only on the protein mitzvahs. It's not even a fikr. But the Rambam learns that the mitzvah assumes even the protein mitzvahs. So now, interesting is, but the Mishnah Melech makes another very, very important statement, which we don't know that it's true. He says that the reason why we don't say Aseh Dechalois Aseh in it is separate posuk by this galach is because it's not a separate mitzvah minyan mitzvahs. That you measure Aseh Dechalois Aseh by minyan mitzvahs. It's an amazing observation, and I don't think it's true. Boraya, we'll get to it soon. I don't know. There's an assay of Heker Mitzvah. The Rambam talks about it in Shiur Aleph, and the Rambam clearly says that Priya and Prima of Mitzvah is Doicha Loisaseh of Kohen Gadol. The Aseh of Priya Prima, which is Heker Mitzvah, is Doicha Loisaseh of Priya Prima by Kohen Gadol. Hilcha Saras, Tumas Saras, Perek Yura Lochabav. If you were Kohen Gadol, should start Purim, Pureu Purim, Shaseh Doiches Loisaseh. And even though Priya Uprima Achelke Mitzvah, as the Ram says clearly in Shiur Aleph. This is Aseh Kufiyah days. So maybe it seems to be clear, but not 100% clear, that maybe only Chelke Mitzvah could be Doicha, and maybe Pratei Mitzvah will be different. We have to know about that. But the point that the Mishnah Melech, that he assumes that you need minyan mitzvahs in order for Aseh Dechalois Aseh, clearly, Prima Fakir, the Rambam brings a raya that there's a mitzvah of Heker Mitzvah for the fact that Prima is Deicha, even though the Rambam Heker Mitzvah, each one of them is making the other. You need all of them, and there can be Dechina on one of them independently, which is an amazing thing. But the Rambam says. Then there's also we mashi tzricha mehezing giluach kloima tiglachas hanesek v'zu hazeh mechelke dineho chelke dineho bi'echus tumosa chelke dineho bi'echus tumosa. Echus Tumos is a very bad translation, very poor translation. Hapach translates Veheich Metame. It's very important because we talked about before of how the Mitzvah is declared as being Tameh. We haven't talked about how the Mitzvah is Metame. And that's the end over here, what he's talking about. That's also Chalkei HaMitzvah. And that the Rambam is in Perek Yud, Milchus Tumas Saras, Halacha Yiralf Yirbeis, HaMetzora Av, Me'ovas HaTuma, Metame Odom, Bekelim, B'Mago'o, Ukli Cheres, Be'avir, Ba'aviroi. Just wondering what it is. I assume that what he's doing is sticking his hand in and not touching the Kli Cheres. It's a different issue. Cheres, because they have Metame Levon, the Ram Shita. Umetame Odom, Amasa, Umetame Mishkav, Umoisha, Vafilu Tachas Evan, Kezav, Zova, Shneim, Vachimis, Begodov, Vitor, Mipia Shmuel Lomdu, Shetom, Tam Mishkav, Umoisha, Viachra, Viachra Muska, Viachra Muska, Bcholelu, Chuma Yisera, Yesh Mitzera, Shemetame Biosa, Lebayis, Vein Bimehech later, Vein Bimehezka. So that's peculiar about Tumas Mitzera. So that's Tumas Mitzera, and that's what I wanted to add from last week. Okay, now next. Now is Kuf Beis. Now is HaMitzvah Ashtayim Umeya Liyos Beged So Mitzera Tomei or Histamus Beged Mitzera, which might be better translations. Umitzvazu Kolelis Ko Mishpatei Soras Begodim. So it includes everything. It includes the fiqh, it includes all the mishpatim, it includes everything, all the platei dinim. Now here, Eicheim Tmeim means Heicheim Mistamim. So here, there are peculiar dinim of Nigei Begodim, how they are Mistamim. And you need Sefer Rak or Damdam. And you find that that's in Perek Yud Beis Halacha Aleph in Tumas Saras, and in Perek Yud Gimel Halacha Aleph he'll deal with the type of begodim that are mistamin. Eicheim mistamin, the eicheim mitamin. How are nigi begodim mitamin? And that's the dinim of that in Perek Yud Gimel of Hilchos Tumas Saras. Halacha Yud Gimel Echad Beged O Kli O Shisia Erev Amuzga O Amuchlot Leyin Tuma Harihu Ab Me'ovas HaTuma Kodom Mitzayel L'Chol Dovo Mitam Memaga Uvamasa Uvabiyah She'isa Mishka Uvomoishav Afilu Tachas O'Evid. So here is odd. I'll explain to you why. Because, you see, if there would be something peculiar about the tumor of Nigei Begodim, different than Odom, then there's a reason to quote it here as telling us that it's really something that tells you that these are different mitzvahs. But the Ram seems to say that they're the same, okay? See, I could make a case that they're different because the din of Reshe Veruboy coming into a bias, a boil a bias, was only formulated by Adam. Here, you would need, I assume, in Beged, you would need a shear of tumah in order to make the tumas beer. So, if you need a shear Beged, it would be the shear Beged. Whatever the shear would be, that's what it would be. But it's not Reisha Veruba. I'm not sure what the Rama means. Eichei metamin. That's the point. In other words, I would assume that you need something peculiar over here. That's what I'm a little bit confused about. Because the Rama goes out of his way to say Nigi Odom and Nigi Begodim are really the same. But there are differences in terms of Baal Abayis. Uma mehem tzorech hezger, or kriya, or sreifa, or chitza v'tayra. Here is very things which are very, they are clearly peculiar to Nigei Begodim. And that you'll find kriya sreifa, the Ram in Hilchas Tumas Saras, Perek Yud Beis Halacha Vov, Beged shekol imenu mokoim hanega b'tofa matlis kamo shebi'alnu v'choza nega kigris ala beged mates hamatlis umatzilo v'siriv sha'al beged choza nega ala matlis siriv is akol. So the different dinim of sreifa and kriya in Nigei Begodim. And then there's in the hezger of Lechitza and Tahara, the Lechitza, Kibus, and Tahara, I see as two separate things. The Lechitza, I would assume, is Kibus, and there is a Tahara of Mei Mikvah. Here, I don't understand what he wants. Because we're talking about here about how the maybe it's very strange. You're talking about how the heichei metamin, okay, uma behem tzorech hezger or kriya. So the or sreifa or chitza v'tara. We're talking not only about the dinim of the hezger and what you do with them, but also in the tahara. Kibus, the tahara. It's a new thing coming over here, which I'm a little bit confused of how it fits in, unless the nege is mechayev. We're not talking about the tahara, but the nege is mechayev. The nege, the kriya, the hezger, the tahara. I'll explain to you what I mean. And this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's a very interesting question. See, you would assume that once you have the nega, which requires lechitza and tayra mikvah, there's an obligation. It basically is sharana, it's religious law, but once you're into it and you have such a case of a nege beged, and you have to do a chitza v'tara, so then you do it. You have to do it. The question is, this tara over here, which l'chera is very similar to the tara of Mei Mikvah, which you're going to talk about in mitzvah, maybe it's Kuf Ches, Kuf Tes, probably Kuf Tes, I think if I'm not mistaken. The Rambam goes out of his way there to say that the tahara is basically a rishus. You can remain tamei and there's no problem. The question is, when the person leaves the beged that requires uchitza v'tahara, is there a chiyuv or it's rishus? And if it's only rishus, and it basically is the Taira HaKilul, which the Rambam has in mitzvah in mitzvah Kuf Tes, if I'm not mistaken, so you're actually back to where you started from. What does that have to do with mitzvah Kuf Beis? Why is he mentioning it? It's not part of this mitzvah at all. You want a Tara which is peculiar to Nigei Begodim. So that's a little bit confused about. I'm not sure which way to go. V'zula zeh shebo b'kosuv u'ma shebo b'kabbalah. The Rambam stressing that there are dinim that mufurish in Torah shebiksav, and there are dinim that are only Kabbalah. Here, the Rambam in Mishnah Torah you will not find a reference to this, but in Pirush Mishnayos, you will find it in Perek Yud Aleph in two separate Mishnayos. In the Pirush Mishnah in Perek Yud Aleph, in the Goyim Mishnah Yud Aleph, Perek Yud Aleph Mishnah Vov, Choza Nega Lebeged, Matzil es hamatlis, Choza lematlis, that which after you did it clear, you attached it to the beged, Serif es habeged. The nega on the matlis is mechayiv sreifa on the whole beged. Even though you karei that mokim and you added something else, that is part and parcel of the. And then he says like this. That's the Mishnah. Comes the Rambam, Pirush Mishnah Omer Yis'ale v'im tira oid ubo b'kabola ein oid ela b'mekemei shetira b'mokim shenirasa tchila ulefik nira nega b'tlai she'osa mokim nega rishon she'ser b'mokim rishon she'soraf, because he was served the first tlai, serve as kol habeged, k'mo shenema b'kosav parachas hi be'esh tisrofen. That's point number one. One Kabbalah. Kabbalah number two. Perek Yud Aleph from the Goyim Mishnah Yud. Nil b'shisi ha'oimed ha'orig toho. If you see it in the shisi, the two different sides of the two different directions of the loom, if it's only in one direction, the other direction is toho. Nil ba'orig ashisi ha'oimei toho. Nil b'sadin serif es hanimin. Nil b'nimin hasadin toho. Cholok shnir boinega matzil es ha'umiyos. The outer, the layers, the parts that are the extension of the beged. Sheboy afilu hein al gomo. The Ram Pirush Mishnah says, "V'omdu lekach" in Pirush Mishnah, "Mima shenema v'soraf es habeged, o shesi o es ha'erev." O es ha'erev. B'tzema o b'pishtim. V'yitzorach loima v'soraf es beged atzema o ha'pishtim. Ulefi she'omer b'tzema o b'pishtim mashma sheyesh behen mash yisrof u'mash yishoyer. That shouldn't be soref. Ubo b'kabola shemeshayrin mimenu ese imuyos, the extra ornaments or the extra part of the beged, which is really not part of gufa beged. Afilu hoy shel al gomon shehut semen sheloi tachshev she'eno imuyos nitzolos mili soref. Usually the silk, the zav, the ornaments, and that's a Kabbalah. So the Rambam mentions over here Kabbalah. There's because of it, and that's also something very peculiar about Nigei Begodim. That there's Kosuv and Kabbalah. Interesting is the opposite. In Mishnah Torah, the Rambam makes a big deal about the Kabbalah and Nigei Batim, and not in the Mishnayos. Very odd. Not mistaken. Okay? That see here, I'm confused about something. And I'm not sure what happens over here. See, Kabbalah, when it comes to Shrana, religious legislation becomes very odd. Becomes very odd. The problem is like this. Because religious legislation, the Rambam clearly says in the Mitzvah Aseh Nedorim, Mitzvas Aseh, he goes out of his way that the psukim that deal with it. The Psukim talk about it. It's Mefurish in Torah Shebiksav. He says it in Mitzvah Kufches, in Mitzvah Tzadihei, and in the Minyan HaKotzer in Kufches. So maybe the fact that there's a Pirush Makubal is not enough. Not enough. So then, why is he mentioning over here that there's a Pirush Makubal? So maybe he wants that there's a Kabbalah over here only to point out the difference of the reason why it's a mitzvah is because of the kosov maybe. But the Kabbalah is to make it different because this has Kabbalahs also. It's very confusing why the fact that you have Kabbalah should be a reason to make it different. The question is, what does the Ram want over here? He's either, conceptually, it's one of two things. Either that's a reason to make it different and peculiar, and therefore it's a different mitzvah. But is it possible that it's a different mitzvah because of the Torah Shebiksav, and the Kabbalah making it different could augment that difference and make it a separate mitzvah? We have to understand what's happening here. Okay? That is Kuf Beis. Now, Kuf Gimel. VaMitzvah HaSholosh Umeya. Vihi Shetzivonu Liyos Beis Menuga Tome. Or, as the proper translation should be, Histamus Beis Menuga. It's tumah. It's becoming its expression, the tumah. It's becoming tumah. Its expression is Tamus Beis Hamenuga. Umitzvizu koleles tumas batim kulam. So this also, again, they were trying to say all the different permutations of the mitzvah, all the different protei mitzvah, and the fikah, and are all subsumed under here, under this mitzvah. Uma behen tzorch hezger, uma tzorch hezger, uma men tzorch hezger. O netitza lemiklik sasak solim, o nitoitz nitutz kloli, the whole house. Ubema ze yitamu yistamu, how it becomes tome. The eich yitamu, how to yitamachel. So here, the peculiar dinim in the gibatim. In Perigid Beis, first of all, Nigibatim again is Yirakach and Adamdom with Pisyan. The peculiar dinim in Bayis, what requires a Bayis Dalit al Dalit, in many halachas is the peculiar dinim by the Beged. Now, how it's matame in Hezger, the Ram points this out in Perik Tezvov, halacha beis, v'motza nega, sheposa b'seif shvur sheni, o she'omad be'enoi choletz, es ha'avonim, shebehen hanega, u'mix ha'sa'ofo, el michutz le'ir, v'toch es kol ha'bayis ha'mazgiroi, shvur shlishi. U'b'yoim tisha, also, goes through all the different dinim, and when you have chalitzas Mitzvas and chalitzas kuloi, and this he has in Perik Tezayin, Perik Tezvav halacha beis. And then Ma'itamu, that he has It's the Shlosh Simonim. It's Yirachach when Adam Dom and Pisyon. But the Rambam does something interesting here, and here's what I meant. The Rambam writes in Perek Yudal Halacha Beis, he goes out of his way in Mishnah to stress the Kosuv in the Kabbalah by Nigei Batim. He starts like this: Perek Yudal Halacha Beis, Shlosh Simoni Tumu Yesh Babatim, Mari Rakrak V'Adam Dom B'Pisyon, V'Kulam Mefuroshim B'Teira. ושני המארס מצטרפים זה עם זה, ופישן הסמוך כושרו, והריחוק כגרס. אבל החייזר, אחת תיתוח כשני גריסים. So these are very peculiar halachas, they're only by Nigei Batim. Then he says, in Perek Tesvav Halacha Aleph, and this is what I'm interested in, Nigei Batim yesh ben hezge shloisha shavuos shehein tisha asa yoim sheyom shvi ol lekan lekan v'yom shloisha asa ol lekan lekan nimsas atolomed shimsoch gimel shavuos re'eu b'shvi b'yom yudgimu u'b'yom tisha asa v'hezge batim gimel shavuos eino mufurish b'Torah V'chein loy dinei nigei batim divrei Kabbalah hen. So it is very odd that the Rambam goes out of his way and points out that in Nigei Begodim, it's Kosov and Kabbalah, and Mishnah Torah, there's no mention of the Kabbalah in Nigei Begodim, and he makes a clear statement that Reiv Dine Nigei Batim HaKabbalah. Is this something, I'm just wondering, is this something, this is l'chera something that makes it into a separate mitzvah? Is the fact that it's Kabbalah? That's a little bit odd, the fact that it's Kabbalah, or the fact that it's different. That's the question is, well, what is the meaning over here? So why does he stress the Kabbalah? Okay. Then he has v'echi tamu. Echi tamu. And the Rambam has in Perek Tezayin Halacha Aleph, Beis Manuga Abmi Avasatumo, Kol Nogea Boy Nitmo, V'im Avonim, V'chein Avonim Shecholtzim Meno, Ache Hezgir, or Avonim V'eitzim V'ofo, Shel Ba'is, very odd things, they never Makabel Tumah in general, and they're just Metame, Kishenoitzin Oisei, Kulan Avasatumo. They're an Avatuma, but we don't even know if they themselves are a Kabul Tumah. And that's a Chaim, in fact, in stencils, probably in, maybe it's in Dam Nida, or the next parak afterwards in Nida, that he points out that the Beged is, the Beged Shiva Erev Makabul Tumah Saras, therefore there could be a Kesem, because it's Nofal Adov Makabul Tumah. But an Eitzim Vavonim are not Makabul, it's not Makabul Tumas. Tumas Nigei Batim, but it's Tomei. V'chol kezayis mehem metamei odem b'kelim mago masalabiyah. Now, next. Kuf Dalet. So I just wanted to stress again that these three have very peculiar dinim. And the question is, how do you know when to make this call? Because there are peculiar dinim in each one of the Nigei Adam, but he learns that basically there's a tzara shova and there are mitzvah kolos, and maybe you have mare baheres and lovon, but nesek is not like that. The question is, what is the tzara shova? Unless you say the mitzvah of Heke Mitzera and Tiglachas with Sipurim. and this peculiar dinim of nigi begodim, and peculiar dinim nigi batim. And because of that, like in mitzvah kuf yud zayin, in Eilchin, there's separate mitzvahs. Mitzvah kuf dalet. Va mitzvah ho'arba umeya. He shetziva liyos azav tomeh. U'mitzvah zu koleles mishpatei advorim shiyeh bohen azav, ve'al toa heyoisei mitame luzulosei. Zav, we said, and then he mentions Shechva Zera, which is a peculiar type. Zov and Shechva Zera are basically the same. Depends on Mavush or not, we'll see about it. And then in Kuf Vav he mentions Zavo. He doesn't mention Zavo together with Nidni Yoledis, because Zavo and Zov are basically Chayli. And if you remember, before we had the mitzvah, the korbanos of Zav Zovo, the Ram said that since they're the same, and it's a refuah from Chayli and a korban for Chayli, maybe it should be one mitzvah. And he has a discussion that Zav is Beloiven and Zav is Beloiven. But this is Chayli. And since it's Chayli, it's a whole separate thing. So Rambam has, I guess, Tzaras is also Chayli. He has Chayli of Tzaras. And whatever, I'm not sure. Tzaras is Chayli, I'm not sure. Batim and whatever, it's a question of the man's Chayli, I'm not sure exactly. But he certainly has here Zava, which is, Zav is Chayli. And Shechva Zera, it's not Chayli, but it's the same Chefsa, which is the Tumah. And then Zava. Now, it's clear that Zoiv is a chili of the Evi Azera. The Ram says this in the Pirush Mishnah, Peri Beis, Mishnah Beis and Zovim. Hazivus hi machlo mi machlis klei Azera. V'hu sheklei Azera nechlash klichom hamachzik hama'akel v'shar klichis haguf oim di b'matzov mativi. V'oz yizal Hazera כשאינו בושל ויוצא בלי הנו, בלי קישוי. ויהיה מרעיל נויטל מימוס, מטה ודולה במהוסה. So even though he calls it loiven, as opposed to Eidim, it's neitel admimus. This is very interesting. Okay. And here the mitzvah is his tamus hazav, as we had in all the other cases. The same thing if they're different permutations or different proteidinim, it's all one mitzvah. And hadvorim she'nase bohen zav kapach zulu better, not she'yiyeh bohen zav. V'alteya heyoisei mitame. Valteya, that's Ibn Tibbon. Be'eze, this is much better. Be'eze oifen mitame luzlosa. First, we're talking about how he becomes a zav, and secondly, we're talking about how a zav is mitame. A zav is mitame just exactly the way a nida and a yoledis are mitame. We read those ramas before, except the din boil nida was never formulated by a zav because it's impossible in the sense that we're talking about by a zobo nidin yoledis. Okay. Now, kuf hey. The mitzvah now is shichva zera. Shichva zera is interesting. Rav Sadi Goin makes it to 3 mitzvahs. And the Rambam is one. It's the tumah from Shichva Zera, and how the tumah is metame the kli or the odem that yotzi menu or the isha is all expressions of the mitzvah Shichva Zera. Or mitzvah zukolelis mishpatei tumas Shichva Zera kula. See here comes of Sadia. It's histamu shichva zera. That's the mitzvah. Is Rav Sadia in Perek Beis is like this. Perek Beis of his Sefer Mitzvos. Perek Hasheni Shar HaTahara V'utfilas Kol Haguf B'mayim V'chayovim B'zeh B'glal Asor Dvorim. And what are the first three? Harishon B'glal Tuma Shebolo B'laylo B'yoyim B'sheno B'hokitz. If it's any time, just being very prolific, very graphic. First case. V'chein mitzvah 1. B'glal ba'alas bilas ha'ish es ishtoi shneim chayovim litbo. Al pi oimroi v'isha asher yishgav ish oiso shichazera. And then he has a third case, v'chein biglal negias ha'odom o kli mishichvaz hazera yishlichot zakol k'er v'chol beged v'chol or. So there are three figures of shichvaz zera, and Rav Sadi going Kedaka B'Kodesh that is Moine Fikeh has its three separate mitzvahs. And the Rambam in Shiur Shvi has it as one. The interesting thing is that he mentions this mitzvah as the mitzvah is the tefillah, and in Perek Zayin he takes other cases, not of shichvah zera, and he talks about it as the tumah, or what you have to do because of the tumah. Now, Kuvov, Hish Divon Liyos Hazava Tmeya, which we said Histamus Hazava, and we said that it's a chili. V'yishiki Yoz's Doim Yom Ram B'loyes Nidasa Okisazo, and the Ram clearly said that it's a chili. And he said it before when he talked about the mitzvah of Kabbalah in Ayin Hey. He shetzivanu shetakriv korban kol isha zovo keshetisrape mizivus. So it's an interesting thing that the tumah itself, which is an expression of the chayli, is also part of the mitzvah. It's a very interesting thing. And this makes tumas nida, or part of it, because tumas nida, tumas zava, there's nikiyim, shiva nikiyim. But part of making it is the fact that this is chayli and that's not chayli. Okay. Now, mitzvah kuf zayin, mitzvah asheva umeya, hishtivon al tumas meis, istamus ameis, mitzvah kus koleles kol mishbri tumas meis. It's the whole Maseches Oros, all different permutations. Mes metama maga mas ba'oil, maga ba'oil, mefurish ba'kosuv, masa b'piyah shmua. And it's a very peculiar tumor, and it's only the Ram doesn't, it's so clear that it's different than the others, the Ram does not feel it necessary to explain it at all. That's a separate mitzvah. Because the fact is that it's Avi Avoy Satuma, as opposed to everything else. Katzloch Rabba, have a nice week.